this eventual goal of what I call THC irrelevance, where to the farmer, no one's coming to test your crop. Our kids and grandkids will laugh about this. I'm out there with my kids and the inspectors there, and I'm telling them, enjoy this, watch this happen, watch the government coming to our ranch, because that's weird. Nobody comes to our ranch, let alone the government. Watch the government coming to our ranch, taking a sample of our superfood crop, which we paid $700 for the right to grow to feed our family, and take this sample, which we're also paying for, to make sure that some forgotten drug war level it's absolutely insane and happens to be unworkable. And it's a violation of human rights, and it's un-American. You should be able to grow whatever the heck you want.
That's Doug Fine, hemp farmer and journalist, and also the author of a new book called American Hemp Farmer: Adventures and Misadventures in the Cannabis Trade. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I'll talk to Doug Fine about his new book, which offers a whole lot of practical advice for hemp farmers, told with humor and urgency. We'll talk about climate change mitigation through regenerative farming practices and values. We'll get into the arbitrary nature of the 0.3% THC threshold and why THC irrelevancy is a worthwhile goal. Plus, we'll hear about what the great American agrarian-philosopher Wendell Berry said when he left a message on Doug's answering machine. All that and more, but first, a few nuggets of hemp news. Last week, New York Senator Chuck Schumer wrote a letter to USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue urging him to delay implementation of the interim final rule set to go into effect on October 31st of this year. He says that the new rule will put undue burden on farmers and state agencies, all of whom are still dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. I reached out to Schumer's office for comment, still waiting to hear back, but we'll be following this story for sure. Okay, here's another story from New York State. WENY News is reporting that Great Eastern Hemp has decided not to build a hemp processing facility in Broome County. The region was poised to become an epicenter of hemp processing in the state, but Great Eastern Hemp is now the second company to pull out of the region. Southern Tier Hemp dropped their plans to build a processing center in Johnson City earlier this spring. Meanwhile, according to the Evening Tribune, construction at the Canopy Growth Hemp Industrial Park in Kirkwood, unveiled to much celebration last year, appears to be moving slowly. Okay, and one more story, this one coming from Texas. So a few weeks ago I mentioned here that the state of Texas was banning the sale of smokable hemp products. According to Houston Public Media, the state of Texas is now being sued by a handful of small Texas hemp companies who argue in a lawsuit filed last week that these new rules prohibiting the sale and distribution of smokable hemp products are unconstitutional. Sarah Curver, owner of Custom Botanical Dispensary in Austin, one of the plaintiffs in the suit, says that if customers can buy hemp products, they should have the freedom to decide whether or not they want to smoke them. I'll have links to these stories on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. And now, on to my interview with Doug Fine. Doug Fine, author of American Hemp Farmer. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast.
Great to be with you here.
Could you briefly introduce yourself for us, please?
Sure. This is Doug Fine coming to everyone from the Funky Butte Ranch in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. At what's supposed to be the peak of monsoon season, but is ready for some more rain. And yes, I'm a regenerative farmer and trying to see if we can keep digital age life going, but in a regenerative way, meaning in a way where it can continue for future generations and we're not dependent on petrochemical industrial pipeline.
You're also a writer, journalist, sort of a comedian. Is that true? I don't know.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment. I think if I hadn't gone for the regenerative life, that maybe a stand-up would have been the goal. But I do think that it's easiest to get across pretty much even the most serious of points if there's humor involved, especially self-deprecating humor.
Right.
A lot of everything that I've written, books and other forms of journalism and radio work, has been myself in there getting things wrong and not knowing how to do it, at least at first.
So your most recent book, American Hemp Farmer, I would really like to share with our audience. So this book is part memoir, part how-to guide, part self-help book, and a primary source historical documentation of the birth of an industry. So first of all, thank you for writing this book. I found it very enjoyable and informative, and I think a lot of our audience here in the hemp space will too.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, your book opens with a story about a wildfire that threatened your ranch in New Mexico. Can you talk about how wildfires are connected to climate change and how climate change is connected to hemp?
It's funny, Eric. And by the way, besides being good to be with you and realizing that you have a worldwide audience, it's good to be speaking to a podcast based in the area where the initial colonial era and early U.S. hemp industry was really headquartered in Pennsylvania. So founding fathers learning from Pennsylvania farmers. This is before Kentucky and other regions came on. So this is great. As far as the climate change and wildfire item goes, it's funny. Just before we started rolling here, we were catching up, and you said, "Gosh, the storms that are, hurricanes that are, would once be thought of as millennial or severe just seem to get more so and these days." And I think that's the case everywhere. The earth will be fine regardless of human decisions. The question is whether or not we will be able to keep it going here as a species, or at least a species that's enjoying this sort of miracle of satellite communication and all that. I don't know what's powering you right now, but most people aren't powered by solar power, which is, by the way, something I addressed in an earlier book called Farewell My Subaru, Trying to Live Regeneratively but Keeping Digital Age Comforts. So we're all in this millennial situation. Millennial is the new normal as far as climate goes, and it's a Pearl Harbor situation in the sense of it's so severe that there's a chance that we could get everybody to rally around this model of keeping society going, but in a regenerative way. And for me, I did have that Pearl Harbor event in 2013, that, ho-hum, 138,000 acre wildfire right in our backyard. Monsoon was late that year too. We came a few weeks away from joining the world's 20 million and climbing climate refugees. But there was a bear in that fire. Monsoon came in time, but not before this bear, who was a refugee from the fire, swooped down over our ranch and in front of my family's eyes killed most of our goats and really changed our lives forever in a lot of ways, day to day, in that we're very, very careful and we're different in the way that we raise our human kids and our goat kids. There's a lot less just running around everywhere. Especially without dogs accompanying and communications devices and all that business, which is the reality of it if you want to live on planet Earth, I guess, these days. But we also realized that we had to take concrete action in terms of living our lives in a way that doesn't make the climate situation, carbon sequestration, carbon emission situation worse, but rather trying to make it better. There's a lot of things you can do. I mean, we repurpose a lot of bottles and stuff in our house to the point where I don't know if I'm pouring, hemp flour or diatoms on my yogurt in the morning. But the real thing is planting hemp. Its long tap roots are wonderful for creating the healthy soil environment that's going to be crucial to humanity's ninth inning recovery effort. This sequestration of carbon that I encourage everybody to do it.
So I'm just going to pick out a few quotes from your book and read them to you and then have you respond a little bit. So in chapter 1, you say, if there's one overarching message of this book, it's that the end game for a thriving enterprise is not a buyout by hedge funds or going public. It's regional investment in a farmer-centric enterprise that focuses on regenerative values as a core principle and business MO. So what do you mean by regenerative values?
So much of my life and the messaging that I'm trying to do as a communicator, a journalist, an author, and just a person is about trying to connect the dots in one's life, we all have blind spots. And there have been willful blind spots that I know I'm trying to eliminate and that feel important to me to try to eliminate. And a lot of us take it to a certain level and then don't want to take it any further. Let's say there's folks that really care and want their kids to have clean air and contribute to environmental groups and take their recycling out every week, but they own stocks or invest, maybe without knowing it. It could be a teacher, it could be the retirement company, in entities that are doing just that. Are, I don't want to oversimplify because we're all, players in this, but part of the problem, right? Things that we're trying to migrate from. Thank you, petrochemical era. You did a great job. Like there's miracles that have happened as a result of churning through fossil fuels and stuff. But the willful ignorance of the fact that it has to be able to be replicated, not thinking of the earth and its resources, such as clean air and water and things in the earth, things like forests, just everything, our backyard, not thinking of them as a system, that has to change. So I always like to think I occupy the reasonable middle ground, and rather than saying, oh my gosh, the current system, this globalized stock-based capitalism is so bad, and just whine about a problem, I'd like to offer solutions that maybe others putting their minds together might be able to bring into reality, or better than the sketches that I'm giving in this book. Because really, it's called American Hemp Farmer, but it's really worldwide regenerative farmer entrepreneur. I'm arguing that there's nothing wrong with entrepreneurialism, but why not keep that same revenue within communities and regions for the most part? I'm not saying bury our heads in the sands. Forever there's been people trading around the world, but as long as there have been humans. But focus, rather than having your dream for an enterprise, to have some magical hedge fund come and offer to buy you out so that you are comfortable, as long as hedge funds and stocks keep their value. Rather, have it be a regional enterprise where the people that run the enterprise are the people benefiting, and that community is the community that's benefiting. At the same time, the benefits of having that regenerative entrepreneurial mindset, if they reflect in regenerative properties in the ground when it comes to cultivating hemp, but this goes to any industry. Hemp is really just the spearhead. The benefits are that the final product is far, far superior. The analogy I sometimes think of is, if you go and squeeze an orange, or go to a farm stand in Florida and somebody just squeezed you orange juice, that is so many magnitudes better than something squished out of a frozen concentrate and shipped halfway across the world. You could barely call it the same taste profile. And I think that's the case for most things in our life. If we try to focus on seeking out regional regenerative producers of anything. And so, since the book is ostensibly about hemp primarily, I sketch how a farmer entrepreneur might do this, from prepping the soil to acquiring the seed/genetics through regenerative cultivation and maybe even petroleum-free harvest. We talk about the metrics of hand harvesting and livestock harvesting versus diesel, and beyond, into marketing, regenerative marketing, thinking of end of life for your packaging, thinking of how big do you want to get? What is the aim for this? This mentality of thinking of an end game that is not just becoming the Kmart or the Walmart of your industry is new to many people. Is it taught in business school? So plotting that out, what works, what's the trajectory, the digital trajectory and the regenerative trajectory and the entrepreneurial trajectory that works best for the planet. So that's what I mean by regenerative economy and regenerative entrepreneurial effort. It's something I'm trying to live. My product, I'm very proud of, a top shelf product, extremely small batch, but immediately certified organic, and now regenerative compostable labels with non-toxic stickum on them, mostly glass, very little petroplastic, just trying to walk the walk, bottom line.
Yeah. Cool. In chapter 2, which is called We're All Soil Farmers Now, you say, if we can collectively get the word out about the nutritive bioavailability and climate change mitigation in our mode of cultivation, we, independent farmer entrepreneurs, are going to have enough of a customer base to do better than just fine, all by choosing the most regenerative, patient mode for soil building. So are those the two strongest things that hemp has going for it, the nutritive bioavailability and the climate change mitigation?
I think many crops and many products have the potential to be powerful forces for humanity being able to thrive 7 generations down the line, let's say, if that's our focus for now. But hemp is spearheading it for a lot of reasons. Um, there's been some studies that hemp, the word, is a powerful brand connoting healthy lifestyles and longevity and regenerative values and those kind of things. So you have a nice brand going for you just when you say the word hemp. And again, the market for hemp is extremely small and has huge, only 1% of American homes have any hemp in it. So that's the brand for the 1% of people who know about it. And part of our mission as regenerative entrepreneurs is to say that by choosing these regenerative techniques, starting in the soil, because that's where we can do the most good for humanity's survival, shout about that in your brand, shout out about that in your branding, and say, we're a regional, 4-family cooperative or B corporation. We're here. We live here. We care. We're trying to build soil so our children and yours have cleaner soil, and that means we produce smaller batch products that may cost more than mixed CBD or mixed hemp hearts in the chain store. Maybe not, but really, what's the price of cleaning your air and coming up with healthier product, better products, more bioavailable products themselves? And an entrepreneur, especially a farmer entrepreneur, can make that argument with any crop. But I'm just arguing that hemp in particular, as we launch this industry, has a leading brand, a niche that another good example is craft beer. Craft beer is really gaining fast on the national beer, big beers, right. Corporate beer, and 1% a year, and will overtake craft. There'll be more craft by market share in our working lives. If these trends continue, then there are sort of big label beer in terms of market share. So why is that? It's because the taste profile is so much better, and people appreciate something that maybe comes from their region. They always have sort of cool, catchy names that resonate within their fat tire, in mountain biking country or whatever it is. And so hemp has the advantage of launching with this mentality, this craft top shelf mentality, as the leading brand. And so the fact that there might be frozen concentrate, i.e. mixed CBD with concentrate grown who knows where, fungible market, marketed by some big company in a chain store, that's not what you're selling. That's not what the hemp brand is. And if we can get that message out, that's win-win for everybody. That's a farmer entrepreneurial mindset that wins in the marketplace. Customers get better products. Main streets can return as rural, and especially rural, but anywhere farming and communities are starting to get 100% of the revenues from their farm products after expenses, rather than the 3% that 3 cents on the dollar that most farmers get of the final product in their farm products today. Wow. So we're talking about a new economic mentality for the world's farming communities as much as we're talking about a new product.
Yeah, like a new value system. Yep. Yeah. One not based on greed. Let's talk about THC a little bit. In chapter 3, you write, the first thing to remember is that hemp plants want a little THC. When you take it out, it generally comes back or it weakens the plant. Stripping THC in the name of some bygone drug war would be like stripping your blood of hemoglobin because a vampire might get drunk on it. So, what are the benefits of THC, and do you think that the legal threshold should be higher than 0.3%? And if so, how does the industry get that law changed?
Thanks for that, Eric. That's the number one policy issue right now. There are maybe 2 or 3 big policy issues in hemp, but this THC issue is the biggest one. Some folks will be familiar with this brief bit of background, but for those who aren't, the cannabis plant, which is the hemp plant. It's all one plant. It only started to be divided up as a result of a 1976 paper by a Canadian researcher who said, researchers too, who said in their words, quote, "We arbitrarily, quote, choose 0.3% THC as the definition for this new variety that," because at the time the drug war, the cannabis war was still going on, and they were trying to say hemp's awesome, we can't deny that, but let's make sure no one ever gets high. Cannabis plant has more than 110 known cannabinoids that interact with other compounds in the plant, such as terpenes, which give this plant and many plants its fragrance, bioflavonoids, which have nutritive components, of course, as we know, many people know. And the cannabinoids reside in the female flower of the plant. There's other parts of the architecture. My own product has flower in it, but also, for instance, the seed part of the plant, seed oil, which is a superfood, just straight up nutritively. The fiber, of course, famous for being really good for things like building, animal bedding, and even next generation supercapacitors at the nano level. It makes great feedstock for that. Yep. But we're talking about here the cannabinoids, the compounds and the flower that interact with terpenes, bioflavonoids, and result in what they call an entourage effect. So all those 100, think of it as a genetic slot machine, like when you are having a human baby. It's the mother and the father's genes, right? And so a variety that's grown in a specific region with specific soil will have this entourage effect of all these different cannabinoids, terpenes, and bioflavonoids. The best known of the cannabinoids are THC, most commonly called the psychoactive component of cannabis hemp. CBD is getting really well known as an isolated compound that has been known to help people with pain relief, and also is, many people whose children have some severe types of epileptic seizure-related illnesses are seeing benefits, and there's some research into cytotoxicity, things like tumor reversal from CBD as well. Myself, I'm a whole plant guy. I believe in the entourage effect. I'm not into just turning a plant into a pharmaceutical and just extracting one part of the plant, but there it is right now. CBD is great. THC is great. Also, CBC is another one. CBG is a big one. There's a CBN that's been also shown with some medicinal properties, as well as helping some people with sleep. So all of those are going to be in your various varieties, and THC is one of them. THC is great. The plant has evolved with THC for a lot of reasons. Predator defense. It makes a stronger plant. First and foremost, big picture, what I would love to see, you got to ask for what you want, is just everyone the world over, religious, spiritual folks like myself, everywhere of all faiths, people, just stop worrying about THC. Cannabis is not like alcohol, and it's not like other dangerous drugs that intoxicate you and wreck families. And of course, anything like honey and carrots can be abused, but generally speaking, for the vast majority of people who even enjoy THC, it's nothing to worry about. But until we get there, and we are getting there as a society, thankfully, because the benefits for society of all legal cannabis is great. But for now, while we delineate between cannabis and hemp, and I say China doesn't. I'm wearing right now a hemp shirt with beautiful fiber from hemp that was grown in China, because one of the reasons the textile markets, there's a lot of reasons, such as lower label cost, but is because there's no one coming to your farm, as happened to me here last week in New Mexico, and testing your fiber crop in China to see what the flower might have in THC. It's to grow that fiber. And that's where we need to get to launch this industry. Stop worrying about micro levels of THC. So the real politics solution, the number one policy issue in hemp right now, is 0.3%, this arbitrarily chosen 1976 number. It doesn't work. The plant, all hemp, generally speaking, wants a little bit more than that. If you really fight your way through the season and do everything you can, and it's the right conditions and this and that, you generally can pass at under 0.3. I generally pass. In fact, all the crops I've really grown myself thus far, fingers crossed, I always pass. But 1% is a much safer level. 90%. By the way, we really needed up to 30% of tests have failed in Kentucky and Colorado some years, barely. And almost none of them go over 1%. So right now, we actually have to change the federal definition of hemp from 0.3% to 1% immediately. And there's real reasons why it has to happen immediately. Some unacceptable regulations kick in on October 31st.
Right.
Predictably enough, if folks want to get more involved in policy, I suggest subscribing to the Vote Hemp newsletter and supporting that organization. They get the news out, and they are fighting for this 1% thing. So 1% has to happen. This eventual goal of what I call THC irrelevance, where to the farmer, no one's coming to test your crop. Our kids and grandkids will laugh about this. I'm out there with my kids and the inspectors there, and I'm telling them, enjoy this, watch this watch the government coming to our ranch, because that's weird. Nobody comes to our ranch, let alone the government. Watch the government coming to our ranch, taking a sample of our superfood crop, which we paid $700 for the right to grow to feed our family, and take this sample, which we're also paying for, to make sure that some forgotten drug war level it's absolutely insane and happens to be unworkable. And it's a violation of human rights, and it's un-American. You should be able to grow whatever the heck you want. Now, if you want to commercially supply female flower that your state says is in excess of their limit, your state's limit, let's say Nebraska's limit for psychoactive, then sure, it should be regulated for adult only use or medicinal use, of course. But at the farm, who the heck cares what your female flower might do, unless you're going to provide it to the public? So that's the eventual goal, THC irrelevance. But right now, everybody, please call your congresspeople and senators, because we gotta get to 1% immediately, like in one of these aid bills coming up. It's gotta happen before October 31st.
Speaking of some bygone drug war, do you think the hemp and cannabis industry, do you think they bear some responsibility in sort of correcting the damage done to communities of color over the years and years of cannabis prohibition?
That's a good question. I remember years ago when I lived in Alaska, a very cannabis-friendly place, and a place that stayed legal for years after the just say no drug, the insanity of the modern drug war started under Reagan in the 80s. There was a legalization bill that very nearly passed, and one of the reasons many people argue it didn't is that it had a provision in it that said the state is not only going to release but may pay restitution to anybody who has been imprisoned for enjoying one of humanity's longest utilized plants. And on paper, that argument is legit. I voted yes,
Mm-hmm.
But there's politically, right is right, and politics can be a real funny thing, but it's hard, especially in these fiscal times, to create an open-ended cost if you're going to get something done. Without doubt, one of the last fronts in the war on cannabis, which fortunately, the good guys have won, and cannabis is returning to its friendship with humanity above ground. But one of the really last fronts is not only stigma, but truly making sure no one is imprisoned if the only thing they are in for is cannabis. And there's a new organization, a nonprofit called the Last Prisoner Project, which is really dedicated to this. It's very important, and I support it. And I'm holding a letter from all around me in my desk right now. I've got my 3D printed hemp plastic goat, goodbye Pacific Garbage Patch. I've got my letter from Joseph Agrio, number 121029 in the Kansas Penitentiary, almost 5 years, 54 months for nothing. He was a medical patient passing through and had his legal in California medical cannabis.
Oh, geez.
Insanity like that has to end. And there's thousands of people. I think if you just start talking about people that they don't even pretend to try to say there was a gun involved, what would they say if they raided some of us who are legal? We have our shotgun locked up. It's not hunting season. They could say, oh, there was a gun on the premises. That's violent. But for the ones that there was no pretense of anything except flower, this plant, That's obviously like like so much of the criminal justice system, especially last half century, skewed in terms of ethnicity and race, and poverty levels too. It's really just beyond color. It's who can afford lawyers, bottom line.
Right.
And yeah, so that obviously has to change. That was a long-winded way of saying cannabis prisoners immediately all must be free, and that's a hugely important thing. When it comes to things like restitution, that's a bit more difficult.
So in the book, you periodically return to two very distinct and almost mythic voices, two of my favorite people, Dolly Parton and Wendell Berry. But is there someone else in real life that's been your mentor and guide, someone like without whose help your hemp journey wouldn't have happened? Somebody that's like made a difference for you?
Thanks for asking that. There are many. I believe, really, even the people that I've met in life who have maybe caused me even the most stress. I can't think of any more thankful I could be than to be here right now in good health with a loving family and a beautiful home. There's literally hummingbirds swirling outside my window, speaking to you about the importance of hemp cannabis and with hope for how it might help humanity. And I'm just in from our own fragrant hemp field today, which is looking really good. So I'm very thankful for that. So yeah, everybody who crosses our paths in some way instructs us. And I believe me, I prefer the positive ones to the negatives, and they've been far more positive ones. So I'll mention just a couple that have been instrumental in hemp. The folks at the Fat Pig Society Organic Hemp Cooperative in Colorado, they were friends of mine before they formed that cooperative, before indeed hemp was legalized in Colorado, and well before hemp was legalized in New Mexico. I knew them when they were in New Mexico, and they went to Colorado when Colorado legalized, to immediately form this organic cooperative. And those two words, organic and cooperative, have been instructive to me. But they also showed me old school shamanistic production techniques for hemp flower, for extractions that I use in my product. I like this process called decarboxylation, and it's basically double toil and trouble, extracting those cannabinoids and from the flower. And as I mentioned, I use the hemp seed oil as well as a base. So you're getting the nutritive components of the minerals and the omega balance in the hemp seed with your cannabinoid profile from your hemp flower. And so they taught me that. So I have to shout them out in so many ways as being instructive to me. And I also have a colleague who's written about prominently in the book, who's been really a mentor and a hemp professor to me, my colleague Edgar Winters in Oregon. He holds modern Oregon's permit #1, but he first started cultivating with his grandfather in 1957 in Alabama after Prohibition had started, because his grandfather, and boy, resonates, saw the plastic crap, as he called it, of plastic baling twine that was coming online in the Better Living Through Chemistry era, and said, we're going to grow hemp because it's going to make better cotton bales. We're going to have a competitive advantage in the cotton marketplace because we're still sticking with our hemp baling twine. That's our selling point. And that's when Edgar, as a very young kid, still learned how to grow hemp and also learned value. So those are two people who have been mentors, but I'll also mention one of the two other folks mentioned in the book that you alluded to, Wendell Berry. It's a fun story in the book of how I wrote to him on hemp paper to invite him to a hemp conference, and how his message in replying and saying, please, you spread the message for me. For those who don't know, Wendell Berry, famous Kentucky-based author, philosopher, farmer, but his grandparents were instrumental in starting tobacco and hemp cooperatives to stop the farmer from getting ripped off by middlemen at the turn of the 20th century. So he's really got all this stuff in mind, and he, in a voicemail that I've saved, really pushed me to spread the message that, hey, if you're just going to rely on I'm just a farmer, I'm just going to grow it, and this is a valuable crop, so people are going to pay me, wholesalers, let them do what they want with it. That's not how farming works anymore, unfortunately. Not if you want to have long-term security. It's bottom line, dollars and cents. And the only way, he feels, and I tend to agree, I mean, there are situations in people cultivating multiple sections in large states where a wholesale relationship can work, for sure. And it sure is easier, because once you go to value added and market your own product, it's a heck of a lot of fun, but it's years of work, and it's work after harvest. You also are in charge. You're now dealing with your own liability and so many other expenses, where at least the farmer maybe got paid nothing, but at least he or she was done at harvest and drove it to the silo and got some amount just enough to get through the winter, the payoff is a lot greater if you succeed. And I believe that if you get into hemp and grow regeneratively, organically, and stick with it for 3+ years, you have a strong chance of succeeding. And I mean, no matter what side of the hemp plant you go into. But that's saying a lot. There are people who have mortgage payments next month that they're worried about, or they're deeply in debt. So it's not for the faint of heart. Like anything else in life, you're best served by doing something. If it's your calling and can't help it, you've got to do it. You couldn't do anything else. You'd do it even if you weren't getting paid.
Yes, yes to all that stuff. I personally am a big Wendell Berry fan. If anyone out there doesn't know who he is, quick, to the Google machine. Find out who Wendell Berry is. So that ties into my next question, actually. Here's another quote from chapter 3. You say, what we're not going to allow is what happened to farmers of corn, soy, and wheat. Business as usual, namely trapping farmers in the debt cycle to seed and herbicide companies. That's not going to be part of the hemp brand. So what is the hemp brand, and how can farmers avoid getting the short end of the stick?
I'm sure there isn't just one hemp brand, and I'm not the adjudicator for what entails righteous regenerative living. All I can do is try and increasingly walk the walk myself and tell that story as an author and as a journalist doing a TV show about all this now. And so, so hopefully, folks will take it in their own direction. So one question is, what comprises small batch craft hemp? How big, how much production, how wide a distribution radius? We're going to all have discussions about that, because I'll tell you, in the Czech Republic, I'm glad to be able to walk into a store and be able to buy Dr. Bronner's soap and know I can trust it. And they're 100% post-recycle in their packaging, so that's nice. There's the issue of shipping, but do we all want just one soap maker, one hemp seed oil maker that's going to be everywhere? Or do we want many regional enterprises that folks are consciously supporting? And I think most of us would prefer that, the many regional enterprises. And so that's really where that answer is. It's like Wendell Berry said, don't rely on just wholesaling and going for the worldwide market. Be conscious in connecting the dots throughout your process, and you can be completely successful. But if you're a regionally based enterprise, profit sharing, or a cooperative, all of that benefit is going to the members, to the farmers. So it's really not revolutionary in that there's been B corporations and profit sharing and cooperatives for a long time. But now with this new lucrative industry, there's an option for farmers and farming communities to really manifest it in the real world for the greater good.
All right. Doug Fine, author of American Hemp Farmer. And that book is available pretty much anywhere that you get books, right?
That's right. And folks can find links and other stuff, videos, and my dispatches from the Funky Butte Ranch newsletter, all of that at dougfine.com. And social media is at Organic Cowboy. One word with 2 C's in the middle, Organic Cowboy.
Cool. Well, Doug, it's been great to talk to you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. And the questions as always were great, and I'm really glad that you do this podcast. And I guess by way of parting messaging, there's a movement on in the global sort of food political spectrum to create a uniformity, a sort of NAFTA of food production, so that things can get shipped with less red tape everywhere, because they're going to have that stamp of all these kinds of certifications. We all want safe food, and this is something that's covered in depth. I would argue that as top shelf craft producers of hemp or of anything, we're wise to bond together and create a set of food system rules that work for the living foods that we're producing. Problem with worldwide uniformity on food and that kind of shipping and folks' fear of all microbes is what you could kind of describe as the nuking of all products. For whenever it manifests in hemp is if you want to pass into this kind of global food initiative business and some murky food production laws within the US as well, you wouldn't ever touch the hemp. For me, being in the hemp, seeing it, touching it every day, looking at it, touching the soil, it's so fundamental. I can't even, it's like, I can't even imagine not being around the plants. But it's facilities where no microbes of any kind could ever intrude, let alone, not even beneficial microbes. Clones grown inside, not in real native soil, not sequestering carbon, etc. And we're doing it differently, and it's going to require us getting together from a regulatory standpoint at some point soon to say we exist, we want living foods, and these are the rules we accept. And some of those will overlap with FSMA, this supermarket lawyer written food law that is not very good, and this world global food initiative. Some of it will overlap, but we're not going to let our food be nuked into sterility because we're trying to solve dietary crises, obesity, diabetes, and all that. And I believe, and many others believe, living foods are crucial in that. So I just wanted to set folks thinking about how that dynamic might look in future.
Thanks again, Doug Fine. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. Well, that pretty much does it for today's show. Thank you for listening. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Check us out at lancasterfarming.com or get yourself a subscription and we will just deliver it to your farm every week. All right. You can always get in touch with me. Send me an email, podcast@lancasterfarming.com, or heck, just call me up and leave me a message, 717-721-4462. Always looking for show ideas or interesting people to talk to. So please get in touch. I look forward to hearing from you. All right. Until next time, I will see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
Episode 97 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by yours truly, Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Third Shadow.